The observation deck of the Nexus station buzzed with tension as representatives from dozens of species gathered for the annual galactic combat assessment. What had started as a diplomatic showcase had devolved into something far more primitive, when Krikstal, the 7-foot Vorthak champion, decided to make an example of the humans. Mino Chen stood barely 5 feet tall, her Earth-issued combat suit looking almost comically oversized against her slight frame. Dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, she appeared unremarkable among the assembled warriors, exactly how she preferred it. Beside her, David Rodriguez checked his equipment one final time, his jaw tight with controlled anger. "The human female will suffice for our demonstration," Krikstal announced, his forearms flexing as chitinous plates along his shoulders shifted with anticipation. Their species claims to be warriors, yet they send children to represent them. The crowd of alien dignitaries murmured their approval. The Vorthak had dominated galactic combat sports for 3 centuries, their exoskeletons and redundant limbs, making them nearly invincible in close quarters. Several species had already withdrawn their representatives rather than face the inevitable humiliation. "Mino, you don't have to do this," David whispered, but she was already stepping forward. "Actually, I do," she replied quietly, her voice carrying just enough edge to make him remember why she'd earned her call sign. "Someone needs to teach tall, dark, and chitinous about human stubbornness." The combat circle cleared as Mino approached the center. Krikstal loomed over her, his mandibles clicking with what passed for laughter among his species. The crowd pressed closer, sensing blood. "I will make this quick, little human," Krikstal rumbled, raising his primary fists. "One strike to break that fragile nose of yours, and your species can return to whatever backwater." He never finished the sentence. Mino moved like liquid mercury, her body flowing around Krikstal's massive frame as his punch whistled harmlessly through empty air. Her small stature, which had seemed like such a disadvantage, became her greatest asset as she slipped inside his guard. The Vorthak's exoskeleton was designed to deflect energy weapons and crushing blows, but evolution hadn't prepared it for what humans had learned in the fighting pits of Earth. Mino's fingers found the joint gaps with surgical precision, her enhanced suit amplifying her strength as she struck nerve clusters that existed in remarkably similar locations across most bipedal species. Krikstal roared, swiping with his secondary arms, but Mino was already gone, flowing around his massive torso like smoke. Her combat suit's microservos whined as she twisted, using his own momentum against him. What the aliens didn't understand about human warfare was that it had never been about size or strength. It had always been about adaptability and the willingness to do whatever it took to survive. "Impossible!" someone shouted from the crowd as Krikstal stumbled, his left primary arm hanging useless at his side. But Mino wasn't done. She'd spent years studying alien anatomy, memorizing weak points and pressure systems. The Vorthak's redundant circulatory system was their pride, multiple hearts pumping fluid through parallel networks that could keep them fighting even with massive trauma. What they hadn't counted on was someone small enough to access the central junction node. Krikstal swung wildly, panic replacing confidence as numbness spread through his limbs. Mino danced between his strikes, each movement calculated and efficient. She struck again, her suit's haptic feedback guiding her to the exact spot where 3 major neural pathways converged. The effect was immediate and devastating. Krikstal's secondary arms seized up, his legs buckled, and with a sound like breaking glass, his left primary arm simply detached. The redundant muscle groups that should have compensated for injury instead went into cascade failure as their control systems shut down one by one. 53 seconds. David had been counting. The observation deck fell silent as Krikstal collapsed, his remaining limbs twitching uselessly. Medical drones swarmed the combat circle while Mino stood calmly in the center, not even breathing hard. "The human female has achieved victory through disabling strikes," the neutral arbiter announced, its mechanical voice cutting through the stunned silence. "The Vorthak representative is no longer combat effective." Ambassador Thelnax of the Centauri Federation was the first to speak. "How?" The question came out as barely a whisper. David stepped forward, pride evident in his voice. You wanted to know what makes humans dangerous? It's not our strength or our speed. It's that we never stop learning. Mino has studied every species in this room, memorized your anatomies, your weaknesses, your assumptions about how combat works. Mino finally looked up from where medics were working on Krixtal. He thought breaking my nose would prove a point, she said simply. Humans have been breaking each other's noses for millennia. We've learned to expect it, adapt to it, fight through it. What we don't do is underestimate our opponents. She walked to the edge of the combat circle, her movements casual despite having just dismantled a creature 3 times her size. The Vorthak are excellent warriors in Vorthak combat doctrine, but they never learned to fight dirty, never had to adapt when the rules changed. On Earth, the rules change every day. The crowd parted as she approached. Representatives of species that had seemed impossibly alien and threatening moments before, now looking at her with a mixture of respect and wariness. This is why we're here, David added, addressing the assembled diplomats. Not to prove we're the strongest or the fastest. To prove that when everything goes wrong, when the odds are impossible, when the enemy seems unstoppable, humans find a way. We adapt, we overcome, and we never ever give up. Behind them, Krixtal was being helped to his feet, his severed arm being prepared for reattachment. The procedure would be successful. Vorthak biology was remarkably resilient, but the psychological damage would take much longer to heal. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Mino allowed herself a small smile. Humanity's application to join the Galactic Defense Force would be approved within the week. Not because they were the most powerful species in the galaxy, but because when the universe inevitably threw something unexpected at them, they could be counted on to throw something unexpected right back. After all, that's what humans did best.